So a patient you haven't seen in a while walks into your clinic. They've lost 20 pounds. They look great. They feel great. And somewhere in the visit, almost in passing, they mention that they're on semaglutide, Ozempic. So you ask the obvious question, where are you getting it? And the answer is a website, a subscription, a monthly box that shows up at their door with a multi-dose vial inside and a label from a pharmacy that you've never even heard of. So here's the uncomfortable part. We have no idea what's actually in that vial. Not the potency, not the sterility, not the source of the active ingredient, and neither, in most cases, does the patient. This is the most contested space in American medicine right now. Billions of dollars, dozens of telehealth platforms, millions of patients, and a regulatory fight that's reshaping the entire thing as we speak. So today we're cutting through it. Not the hype, not the panic, just what's actually happening and why it matters for the patients sitting across from you. So let's go. Hi everyone, welcome back to Speak MD. I'm Dr. Ajay Balaram, a practicing physician and surgeon, and on this channel we review the technology and forces that are reshaping how physicians actually practice medicine. Now, GLP-1s are not a piece of tech, but the system that's grown up around them, the compounding pharmacies, the telehealth subscriptions, the legal gymnastics, that system is moving faster than most of us can track and keep up with. And our patients are caught right in the middle of it. So here's what we're doing today. 3 things. 1, what a compounding pharmacy actually is. Because a lot of us actually authorized to prescribe drugs have no idea, or maybe we learned about it in passing and never really thought about it again. 2, how these operations have been skirting patent law on a drug that is very much still under patent. And 3, how a genuine drug shortage cracked the door open and why the door didn't close when the shortage ended. I'm going to keep us out of the legal weeds, but I'm going to sprinkle in just enough of the regulatory picture that you walk away knowing exactly what your patients are exposed to, and of course how you can protect them. So the reason this came on my radar is that when you're on Ozempic, there are some anesthetic guidelines about patients being off them preoperatively. One of my patients' surgeries was canceled because they didn't disclose that they were on Ozempic. And they didn't really feel like they needed to disclose it because they were getting it from a mail order pharmacy. So I wanted to understand how these drugs are being sold despite the patent and without their primary care physicians even knowing that they're on it. So if you're a physician, this is continuity of care. If you're a patient watching, this is your safety. Either way, let's get into it. So let's start with the basics because the word compounding gets thrown around like it's a loophole. It's not. It's a legitimate, century-old part of pharmacies. Compounding just means a pharmacy mixes or alters the drug ingredients to make a medication tailored to one patient's needs. Let's say you have a child who can't swallow a pill, so you make a liquid. That's compounding. A patient who's allergic to a dye in the commercial version, so the pharmacist makes it without the dye. That's compounding, and that's the job. That's what it was built for. Now, federal law splits these pharmacies into 2 buckets, and this matters, so stay with me for a second. A 503A pharmacy, that's your traditional state-licensed pharmacy, it compounds for a specific patient in response to a specific prescription. And because of that, it's exempt from a lot of the heavy FDA manufacturing requirements. It makes sense, right? If somebody requests a liquid form instead of a pill, you don't need the FDA coming in and checking the pharmacist when they're making the pill into a liquid. Then you've got the 503B outsourcing facilities. These are FDA registered, they get inspected, and they can compound in bigger batches without a prescription for each individual patient. For the non-physicians watching, think of a 503A as a custom tailor making one suit, and a 503B as a small workshop making a run of suits. Neither one is the giant factory that's making brand label Ozempic. That factory is FDA approved in drug manufacturing. And here's the rule that holds the whole system together. It's called the essentially a copy rule. In plain English, a compounding pharmacy is not allowed to routinely crank out a drug that's basically a copy of a commercially available FDA-approved product. So think about why that rule exists. If a pharmacy could just copy any approved drug and sell it cheaper, Why would anyone ever run the trials, prove the safety, get the approval? The essentially a copy rule protects that entire incentive structure. So hold on to that essentially a copy rule, because the entire GLP-1 story is about what happened when that rule got turned off. So of course on this channel we don't take sides, and it's important to understand that compounding pharmacies serve a legitimate, appropriate role. But it's when those roles get abused is where we get into some gray areas, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So here's where the shortage comes in, and this is the part I really want my physician audience to understand, because it explains everything that followed. Back in 2022, demand for Semaglutide and Tirzepatide went vertical. This is when celebrities started talking about it, and when everyone was saying things like, you think they're on Ozempic? Supply couldn't keep up, so the FDA put both drugs on what's called the National Drug Shortage List. And here's the key. When a drug is on that shortage list, the essentially a copy rule gets effectively suspended for that drug. The logic of the shortage list is actually reasonable. If patients can't get a medication they need, you want compounders to be able to step in and fill that gap. That's the system working as intended. But watch what happens next. That door opens a little bit, and it's not a trickle that comes through, it's a flood. Thousands of pharmacies and online retailers pour into the GLP-1 space, and the pitch to the patients was incredibly simple. The brand name product that runs over $1,000 a month without insurance, the compounded version, $150, $200, maybe $400 a month. That price gap is the whole reason this market exploded. Same active ingredient at a fraction of the price. Now here's the twist. The Tirzepatide shortage resolved in December of 2024. Semaglutide followed in February 2025. The shortage is over. So under normal rules, compounding should have wound down. That door should have closed. It didn't. Instead, compounders got creative. And this is where it goes from filling a gap to gaming a definition. They started adding things to the formula. A little B12, some L-carnitine. Why? So they could argue the product isn't essentially a copy of the approved drug anymore. Other compounding pharmacies switched to non-standard doses or oral and sublingual forms. Anything to dodge that essentially a copy line. And here's the number that tells you everything. By some estimates, around 80% of compounded semaglutide and tirzepatide now includes one of these supplemental ingredients. 80%. Think about that as a physician. There's no world where 80% of patients have a genuine medical need for added B vitamins in their weight loss injection. That's not patient-specific medicine, that's a workaround. Okay, so if semaglutide is still under patent, how is any of this even legal? Good question. Let's talk about it. And I promise to keep us out of the law school weeds. Semaglutide is protected by multiple patents held by Novo Nordisk. The molecule itself is patented. Normally, that means a generic company cannot make it until that patent expires. That's the deal. That's how drug development gets funded. That's what we're used to in medicine. Certain medications are very expensive, but after a certain amount of time, they come off patent, they go generic, and they become much more reasonable. But compounding pharmacies have always lived in a kind of gray zone. The legal theory goes like this. When a pharmacy compounds a drug for one specific patient under a valid prescription, that's a traditional pharmacy function, even if it's a compounding pharmacy. It's not the same as a factory mass producing a patented drug to sell it to the public. So the argument is, it doesn't infringe the patent the way generic manufacturing would. And for years, nobody really tested that theory in court for GLP-1s. The gray zone just sat there, gray, until the money got big enough. And in February of 2026, Novo Nordisk sued Hims & Hers, which was running these compounding pharmacies, and their argument cuts right to the heart of this. Novo is saying, what you're doing isn't patient-specific compounding at all. You're running industrial-scale manufacturing. You're marketing it direct to consumers like it's the same brand, and you're doing it with active ingredients they're calling inauthentic. In other words, Novo is arguing that the gray zone was never as wide as everyone pretended. For the non-lawyers, including me, the question the court has to answer is basically, Is this a pharmacy filling prescriptions or a factory dodging a patent? And the answer is going to set the rule for years. So I'm definitely not going to predict the outcome. That's not my lane. But here's what every physician should take away. If Novo wins, it could effectively shut down large-scale compounding of patented molecules, no matter how many B vitamins you sprinkle in. The whole model your patients are buying from could disappear, potentially with one ruling. So the bigger principle here is that patents fund the trials and the safety data that we all rely on. You can respect access concerns and respect why the patent system exists. We kind of have to hold both. And of course, on this channel, we look at both sides of the opinion. On one side, patients are saying these drugs are way too expensive and they're not accessible for us. On the other side, the drug companies are saying, well, we have to make them expensive to cover our research costs. Somewhere in the middle there is where the truth lies, but it's important that we look at both sides of the system. So now let's bring this back to where it actually counts, your exam room. Because here's the thing about that vial that we opened the video with. The active ingredient might genuinely be semaglutide, but that's where the similarity to the approved product ends. FDA-approved semaglutide is made under validated manufacturing standards. Every batch gets tested: potency, sterility, particulates, stability. The pen is engineered to deliver a precise dose. And one of the most important things, adverse events get reported systematically. Compounded pharmacies, none of that is guaranteed. Now, layer on the part that hits us directly at physicians, the fragmentation of care. There's an Omada Health survey of 2,000 primary care docs, and the numbers are pretty striking. 67% believe third-party telehealth GLP-1 prescribing is a significant risk to patient health. 61% say patients often don't even tell them they're on one of these medications. And only 18% are comfortable with their patients getting semaglutide from a third-party telehealth prescriber. So the overwhelming majority of us are uneasy, and the majority of our patients aren't disclosing. Drug interactions, contraindications, side effects. Nobody's watching the whole board when a patient doesn't disclose the medications that they're on. So for my colleagues, the patient who isn't disclosing their medications isn't hiding it to deceive you. They often just don't think of a subscription box as a real prescription. So I don't want to leave you thinking all telehealth GLP-1 access is the problem. It isn't. The structure is kind of what matters. Compare the bad actors to a model like the Walgreens program that launched in 2026. Pay-per-visit, no subscription trap, a real licensed clinician evaluating the health history, and prescriptions limited to FDA-approved medications only. No compounded products, no pretending the cheap version is the same thing. I think that's the template. We need to provide access without the safety gamble. So if you're advising a patient, or if you're a patient watching, here are the questions that matter. Is it FDA approved or compounded? Who's actually making the prescribing decision? A clinician or some algorithm that just read your questionnaire? Does the price include the actual drug, or is it just a membership? And does your primary care doctor know you're on it? That last one, that's the one that protects you. For my fellow physicians, the takeaway is simple. Ask the question, every patient, every visit. You can't monitor what you don't know about. And for everyone else watching, the cheapest option isn't always the safest option. A subscription that makes it easy to get a prescription is not the same as one that makes it safe to use one. So if this breakdown was useful, hit that like button. It genuinely helps the algorithm get this in front of other physician patients who need to hear it. Subscribe if you haven't already. We're building the largest physician-focused technology and medicine community on YouTube, and every single one of you helps us get there. And drop me a comment. Physicians, how are you handling the patient who shows up already on a compounded GLP-1? And if you're a patient watching, what made you choose the route you chose? I read these, and the best conversations in the channel always happen down there in the comments. So if you got something out of this video, you'll enjoy my latest video on 15 tips for using an ambient scribe, or this one about how insurers are using AI to deny claims and how doctors are fighting back. So as always, thank you so much for watching. I know your time is valuable. Have a great day.